All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, bright and early. I know it's a little bit of a change of date today. We have changed it from Thursday to Tuesday this month only, simply because of the timing from the NAMA conference that many of us were at Wednesday to Friday last week, as well as a very exciting Women in Sectional Title webinar that Carl will tell us a little bit more about. This morning, we're very, very fortunate to have a close colleague in the industry co-hosting with us, Mike Morey. Nicole will introduce him a little bit more formally for those of you that don't know. Mike is the person that gave me my first entrance into this community scheme space, and then was kind enough to take me back the second time around as well, when I thought that I was a little bit too theoretical and needed some more practical experience. Mike is the portfolio manager himself, as well as being the main cheese at Pam Golding Property Management Services. But over to Nicole to do the formal introduction.
Cool. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. As you can see by this lovely picture that's up, this is Atlantic Beach Homeowners Association. For those of you that were lucky enough to join us for our Let's Get Physical event in Cape Town, this is where we held the event, and Mike Morey is currently the managing or the portfolio manager for this scheme, and he did a lovely introduction for us at the event. So for those of you that were there, I'm sure you can remember him. If not, it's fine. It was a very long time ago, and this year has gone by very quickly. But without further ado, let me introduce Mike to those of you who are unfamiliar with him. Mike Morey is a financial accountant who has been in the real estate industry for over 25 years. He has been actively involved in all aspects of finance, systems, administration, and human resource management with both Pam Golding Properties and now Pam Golding Commercial and Property Management Services. He matriculated at Wynberg Boys High and attained his BCom at UCT. His postgraduate qualifications include a degree in corporate business administration, the University of Pretoria certificate in shopping center management, as well as studies towards a BCom honors in financial management at UCT. He has been a board member of the Property Services Chamber of the Services CETA, was chairman of the Western Cape branch and national council member of ICSA, served on the Western Cape Committee of the National Association of Managing Agents, and is currently a member of the Audit Committee of the Cape Medical Plan.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Carl, over to you.
Right. Good morning, everyone. As Linda said, I know we normally have our webinars on a Thursday, so I'd just like to thank everyone so much for joining us today. As this webinar is going to be recorded, I will publish it on our YouTube and website platforms. So please remember, if you haven't, to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'd also just like to say how amazing the NAMA conference was, as it was my first conference, and it was so nice to meet everyone physically in our industry. And then for everyone that missed it, the Women in Sectional Title will be talking about it this Thursday at 11. And then if you haven't already, please don't forget to sign up to our newsletter to keep in touch with the TVDM consultants team, as well as for Nicole's Neighborly Advice. I'll post a link as well to sign up to our newsletter in the chat. And then just a reminder, our next webinar will be on the 17th of November. And then there's also a Straatsburg webinar on the 3rd of November. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Carl. Mike, over to you.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Once again, from my side, I think between Nicole, Zelinda, and Kyle, they've said anything that I could have said. I left the quick wagon wheel in terms of where Pam Golding Property Management Services fits in within the Pam Golding Property Group. But today is, fundamentally less about us and, the 190, I think it's now actually closer to 200 sites of 30 plus billion rands worth of properties we administer. And really today is around body corporate levies and levy contributions. Going to leave any discussion on homeowners association levies to the extent that it's necessary to the Q&A. But before we get into the body of the text, just a quick thank you to any of the Pam Golding Property Management Services staff who tuned in. They may all be sitting in the boardroom having a good chuckle. I'm not sure, but thank you to them, and specifically, and I'm going to put it on the spot at least once or twice, Alex Bench, who is my right hand with the technical content of having put this presentation together. She did a lot of work on it, and with Ruth Grinder, our operations manager, who vetted it. I'm being the presenter with all the hard work having been done in the background. Feel free to kind of pose questions along the way. As Zelinda's indicated and Carl's indicated, the presentation will be made available to everybody. It's kind of useful information to have as a reminder. I checked with Carl and the team. I said, who is our audience? And I note a number of significant names appeared on the list as the names were popping up. So I feel quite under pressure with my associates in the industry to be able to make sure that what we've put together today is meaningful. And then I think on that note, get straight into it. Ordinary levies, we'll chat about a bit. Contributions fundamentally, and I thought about in advance of this presentation today, I thought, many of us have been on a road trip with family or friends, and we try and, slice and dice, well, who's going to pay for what, and we have a kind of contribution system. And I know there are apps that even do it in this day and age as to how you can share costs between family and friends. And it's really the same thing, how do we slice and dice costs? And, if we go straight into our next page of, why are levies raised? The chapter and verses there, we've got to have an administrative fund on the one hand, and a reserve fund, as we know more recently, to have a pool of funds available to do everything that needs to be done. We need, the repair and maintenance, management, administration of the common property, including all the reasonable provision for future maintenance, being that new element that has come into play. Without those funds in play, the body corporate doesn't function. I think most of us in this room are probably fortunate enough to administer body corporates that are generally well funded. But if ever you've managed a body corporate that's in financial distress, it's a major problem. How do you manage those components, rates, taxes, other charges, supply of electricity, water, fuel, all those fun things, especially in this day and age. Diesel, how do we pay for the diesel for the generators that keep the lights on, literally and figuratively? So that is why those levies are raised, is to cover all of those elements. As I've said, the administrative funds on the one hand and the maintenance funds on the other. This next screen talks about section 3.1b, and it says the body corporate is required to keep the funds in place separately from the administrative funds. So we now have those reserve funds, and for those in the room, I think a lot of people do it slightly differently from managing agent to managing agent. We took the step of making it very clear to ourselves in office and to our trustees. We physically have separate bank accounts, which we are required to do, but we actually have those separate bank accounts at different banks. It sounds extreme, but it makes it clear as daylight. It avoids any confusion. It earns interest because those funds build up and increase more and more and more. Those are call accounts. They're not transactional accounts. When we need money for a disbursement, for a maintenance reserve fund disbursement, we then transfer it to our operating account, and then it's clear as to how those funds are then administered and accounted for. The important thing that needs to be emphasized is that section 3.1c talks about those funds, but they are both ordinary levies. So, as it says in the closing statement that you can see there, these contributions are your ordinary levies. We administer a large body corporate. in the Southern Cape, and Zelinda will know what I'm referring to. And they kind of have a little bit of a confused identity as to whether they're HOA or a body corporate. Their name suggests that it's an HOA, but it's in fact technically is a body corporate. When we first introduced the reserve fund contributions, there was much hysteria because everyone got confused and thought we were raising special levies and hadn't followed the required process, and which was of course nonsense. We discussed it at the annual general meeting. It had been approved. We tabled our fund, and we'll get into some of those elements. But the important thing that we flagging here is that they are both ordinary levies, not to be confused with anything else. In terms of how those levies are determined, Section 32 talks about the participation quota of a section and how that participation quota is determined. And as we know, it is a percentage that's expressed to 4 decimal places, and it's arrived at by dividing the floor area to the nearest square meter of the section by the floor area, or the total floor area, to the nearest square meter of all sections in the buildings comprised in the scheme. And that gives you your PQ for the unit. What is really important here, and you know, one sees confusion from time to time, and there shouldn't be confusion because it's a fundamental sectional title 101 concept, is that those participation quota, that 4-digit number, is not ever determined by the managing agents or the trustees. That is determined by your land surveyor. Traditionally, once the construction of the development is busy being finalized, they get the land surveyor, they do an interim measuring of all the sections, and then once they're at the point of practical completion, they do final measurements, and then that gets compiled into a schedule and gets submitted, to the all the various, the Surveyor General, CSOS, all of that gets submitted, and that is once your PQ is then cast in stone. It can't arbitrarily, other than following through a process, which we'll go through in a minute, it is cast in stone. It is what it is. It's submitted to the insurers. We apply that to the insurance schedule, and so on. Excuse me. Then coming to amended contribution rules. A lot of us know that as notional PQs. So notional PQs do exist from time to time. It may be a function of the nature of the development. I'm not sure of how many of you in the room deal with mixed use schemes. Often with a mixed use scheme, there's a need to have notional PQs. You might have one section. We actually administer a very interesting body corporate where one section accounts for 98% of the body corporate and the other 60 sections account for 2%. So, you know, if you do the math in your head quickly, it makes you realize that one section is obviously a massive component of the overall body corporate when 60 apartments only make up 2%. But that is, you know, the nature of mixed use schemes. And those mixed use schemes do require special rules as to how the contributions are gathered from the individual owners. So we've got a couple of those in our portfolio, and one that we're busy dealing with, and it's an interesting one, and it's going to keep the likes of Zelinda and her team busy for a while, and that is where the developer, when they originally set up the scheme, should have put in place special rules and didn't, and now they've got the massive problem of they want to put in place special rules, but you've got your minority group of owners who are able to dominate the decision-making process because of the nature of the resolutions that need to take place. So it's really important, you know, to any of the managing agents in the room, when you're working with developers, particularly in the run-up to a new development, if you see these type of obstacles, guide them, advise them, point them in the direction of Zelinda and their team to say, listen, wait a minute, you've got to try and get this in play up front, because to try and get it into play after the fact is very, very difficult. It speaks there in the middle about the written consent of adversely affected owners. That comes back to our real life scenario. You know, every one of those owners are going to say they're adversely affected, but it needs some sort of means of getting that decision made. You know, when Alex and I were doing the prep for this meeting, you know, we spoke about the concept, and I said, well, if somebody's levy goes from 10% to 11%, they're adversely affected, so they're going to say no. And there's got to be a means of saying, well, yes, there's a movement in terms of that levy contribution, but you've got to look at the bigger picture and understand the nature of it. Exclusive use areas, I think that often befuddles many of us. I've grappled with it over the years. We understand the nature of exclusive use area, and that is that the body corporate must require the owners of a section to have the right to an exclusive use area to contribute towards the costs necessary for those the rates, taxes, insurance, maintenance in respect of all parts, including the provision of water, electricity. And it's a problem because, you know, how do you determine those? So many of our body corporates just apply a flat, it's 30%, it's 50%, it's half. But strictly speaking, that's not the way it should be done. You know, we should be doing the math and determining the actual costs incurred for those areas, and then recording and building up. And importantly, when you get to spend money on that balcony or that patio or that extension, there's a whole back office accounting of the contributions that have been made to date, the extent of that repair that's been done to it, that becomes really quite complex. And we could probably have I think a whole session on exclusive use area contributions and the accounting for it. But the important thing is that is a separate charge, as we know, to the actual levies that are raised in terms of what we've spoken about already. Developer contributions, that is once again a separate discussion, and those are exactly as the term refers to. It's a contribution, it's not a levy. You know, section 3.1d speaks about, you know, the body corporate must require the developers entitled to extend. So we're all familiar with the section 25 reserved right of extension, and often that right to extend, I think generally, and Zelinda, you can confirm or not, is 10 years. They've got 10 years in which they can do that. And often it only comes into play in year 9 or 10. And so we've got to be very much aware, as managing agents of a scheme with a right to extend, we've got to be aware of that. If costs are being incurred, you know, the Act empowers us and requires of us to collect contributions towards any costs that are applicable in respect of those right to extend. Ruth and I had a big development that we were involved in, and exactly that was in play. The developer delayed registration of a number of the sections that existed just under the banner of section 25, and they got away with it, and then eventually had to deal with it, and with a push and a shove. So it's really important to understand the nature of that. Need to just catch up with my notes. I think we're good. Okay, then on to the next screen. The whole subject of special levies, which is a really important one. You know, I think that the whole introduction of 10-year maintenance plans, the thinking and logic behind a 10-year maintenance plan was that in a perfect world, it would obviate the need to have a special levy, because if the planning and preparation and the understanding of the requirements of that 10-year maintenance plan, if that's executed properly by the trustees and approved by the members at the AGM, then in a perfect world, other than something totally surprising coming along, you shouldn't ever have to have a special levy. As we know, many of our body corporates don't do their job properly, and often the owners are under instruction to us as the managing agents to say, listen, keep the maintenance reserve levy to a minimum. We will pay in the special levy when we need to. So technically, we shouldn't be doing it that way. If we know that there's something that requires, and lift is often a big one in terms of that 10-year maintenance plan. If we know all of that information, we should be making sure that our 10-year maintenance plan has built it in. But there is a need for special levies from time to time. And there's importantly, Section 3.3 talks about that the special contribution comes due on the passing of the resolution in this regard, and by the trustees. Important note there, and I think many of you would have faced the dilemma with units that are in transfer. If you're not handling the transfer process yourself, and that you have a transfer administrator, as we do in our office, critically important, flag it up with your transfers administrator the minute a special levy is even being contemplated, so that they can make sure that things don't go wrong with the transfer process, because it can become very time sensitive. Alex underlined it there. It's the body corporate, the levy is due by the owner of the unit at the time when the resolution was passed. Fortunately, the amendments that came in 2016 shifted the responsibility around a little bit, but ultimately it is that person who owns it on the day that is liable for the payment of that special levy. It's only when there's a split, if that special levy is being raised over 3 months or 6 months, then potentially the purchaser becomes liable for part of it. Unlike in the previous, prior to the amendment, the seller was liable irrespective. The annual general meeting and the budget approval. So now we're shifting our discussion away just from levies per se to the annual general meeting and the approval process. In terms of Rule 17 and subject to Rule 2, the body corporate must hold an annual general meeting within 4 months of the end of the financial year. Hopefully, as an industry, we'll get to catch up. I think we all kind of lost a lot of traction in 2020 in terms of meeting those deadlines and timelines. Hopefully the advent of remote meetings and hybrid meetings has improved things. We know that there are a number of service providers who are helping provide technology to assist us in that regard, in terms of tabulating all the elements to it. But one of the important things for me really talks to that second bullet point, where if you're wanting to not hold an annual general meeting if for any reason, then it spells out how that needs to be dealt with. We have a number of small body corporates. I'm not sure about the rest of the managing agents in the room, how you deal with your 2-unit, 3-unit, 4-unit body corporates. We're seeing, particularly in the Constantia Valley, a number of kind of larger properties are subdividing into body corporates. They can't subdivide the urban because of the planning restrictions regarding subdivision in the Constantia Valley. So now suddenly we're seeing a whole bunch of little body corporates that are popping out. They're building individual houses, so each person is responsible for their house, which is a section. So you've got this whole confused identity that I referred to with our Plettenberg Bay property, but on a much smaller scale. Critically important, once again, get those notional PQs, get those special rules in play prior to the registration, much easier to deal with there. But when Alex and I were going through this earlier, I thought, well, this is something that we could put into play for those small body corporates. Just do the admin and make sure that if they're not wanting to hold a full-blown annual general meeting, that you've got that in play. Onto the interim levy increases, and this is really very important, and to the extent that, well, yeah, I'm going to read it pretty much verbatim, because this is something that often isn't handled well. We do it to the best of our ability, and Ruth runs around with her cane and whips our PMs if they get it wrong. But this really has to be done 100% correctly. And one of the reasons for that relates to the levy collections process. If you are going to court or going to CSOS to collect levies for an owner who's got into arrear with their levies, if you don't have those resolutions, if you don't have those documents, you're in trouble. So really take note of this. If you take nothing away from today, just be reminded how important it is that the body corporate must, as soon as possible, but not later than 14 days after the approval of the budgets referred to in the Rule 17 by the general meeting, give each member written notice of the contributions and charges due and payable by that member to the body corporate. Critically important, as we've said. As we all know, there is that time lag between the end of the financial year and the holding of the annual general meeting. So the body corporate may, on the authority of the written trustee resolution, increase the contributions due by the members up to a maximum of 10% at the end of the financial year to take account of the anticipated increase of the liabilities, which increase will remain effective until the members receive notice of the contributions referred to above. So just remember that you can impose that increase. We talk in office about the continuing levies. So it continues from 1 year to the next until replaced. But just critically important, get your correspondence in place, get your resolutions in place, and make sure that once that annual general meeting is held, that schedule is sent out as required, because it can and will come back to bite you. CSOS, we all know that that's potentially a bit of a grudge payment. We understand CSOS, what it can be done. Those who were at NAMA the other day, CSOS were there. It is an important organ of state. And, I think they have improved what they're doing and how they're doing over the last couple of weeks and months, with a bit of hiatus during the COVID period. But they can and do perform an important function. It's our obligation to make sure that those payments are calculated correctly, obviously, in terms of the what's indicated, and then paid over. It was, for me, quite interesting. I think at the opening session of the NAMA conference, where stats were given about how many body corporates exist and how many body corporates are registered at CSOS, and it was somewhat alarming to see the percentage of body corporates that are not registered. So I mean, they're technically not compliant, and hopefully, certainly, none of the people in the room at NAMA conference and none of the people in the room today are amongst those body corporate managing agents who simply say, well, we're not going to worry about it. We'll wait until they catch up with us. So, it is a statutory requirement. One can't opt out of it. Even if you manage body corporates whose schemes are below 500 Rand a month, and I wouldn't know how those would exist. But if that was technically possible so that no contributions are required, you're still required to register. So it doesn't, the absence of responsibility to pay the levy because your levies are low doesn't, negate the need to register with CSOS and have a CSOS registration number. Obligation to pay levy contributions, that once again is all about, your ordinary and special contributions are due and payable on the passing of the relevant contributions or resolution, by the trustees. They're payable by all owners at the time of the passing of the resolution, other than when a unit is transferring during the year. They'll be liable for the pro rata portion up to the date of transfer. An owner may not unilaterally decide to withhold ordinary or special contributions. If an owner believes that the body corporate owes the money, they must declare a dispute, and if all else fails, apply to the Ombudsman for relief. So they can't opt out of it. Many years ago, probably 15 years ago, I dealt with a scheme not far from our offices here in Cape Town, where I argued with a couple of the owners, and they were saying, but I own the unit. Why do I have to pay somebody for the right to stay in it? And we had to do the whole sectional title 101 to explain to them in single syllables, layman terms, as to how it worked, and that they couldn't just not pay levies. They'd moved out of a rentals kind of situation into an ownership situation and believed that they didn't have to pay somebody. So when I quizzed them and I said, well, listen, who's paying for the lift, and who's paying for the common property, and who's paying for the security? No, somebody else is paying it. He's not required to pay it. So you still get those guys and ladies in body corporates who believe that, but hopefully everyone now whisks on to Google, and then they would realize that they are required to pay levies. I didn't even get a chance to put Alex on the spot, but questions and answers. I noted that there was a lot of chats going on in the background, so hopefully, Zelinda, you and your team were responding to the chats. But that's it from my side for the time being.
Perfect, Mike. I've got a couple of questions for you that have come through. Everybody would have seen that I've actually posted those numbers that were given to us at the NAMA conference. I'm not even going to attempt to say the amount that was at the end of my speech. What is that? 47 billion 300. I can't even say it. That
Jacob Zuma.
Yes, that ridiculous number. I'll post it into the chat function and make sure that I don't add any zeros or minus any zeros. But a couple of questions for you. So you did mention the CSOS levies, perhaps just to amplify or to confirm in sectional title schemes, what are the calculations for CSOS levies? And of course, what are the contributions that need to be taken into consideration for those CSOS levies? So there's certain things that are excluded and certain things that are included. What are those that are included?
Sure, I would like to have deferred that technical question, because it's quite technical to you and your team, and put you guys on the spot. But I think as a broad brushstroke, it's the levy that is attributable to the unit. I think special levies are excluded from that calculation. It is just the ordinary levy. Let me just see if I can go back to share screen, and I'll pop back. Lost my spot.
While Mike's having a look there, just a reminder that when Mike mentions levy, it would be both your administrative and reserve fund contribution. Interestingly, in my scheme, the managing agent actually splits that on the levy statement, the admin levy plus the CSOS portion, the reserve levy plus the CSOS portion. And I see, Mike, you're sharing there.
Yeah. So I just called up the screen that we had. Alex is quickly looking at her reference material. But as I said, for me, it's the lesser of the 40 Rand, or the 2% of the amount of which the monthly levy charged by the scheme exceed. So on a simplistic level, it's the levy attributable to the unit. We'll see if maybe I'll answer another question or two, and we'll see whether we can just reference where it refers to whether the exclusive use levies are excluded from that or not. That, the best of my knowledge, the application. Ruth, if you're online, I might put you on spot as well. You might have.
Exclusive use is not a part of it. Exclusive use is excluded. Only the section. Exclusive use is not a levy; it's a recovery.
Perfect.
Yes.
And that actually answers, Ruth, one of the next questions that was raised is the exclusive use area. Do you call it a contribution or a levy? And I think Ruth has answered that there, that it's a recovery. So that means that it is your contribution as opposed to a levy that is calculated and covered. Fantastic. Mike, there's another question.
Yeah,
when the developer has a reserved right to extend the scheme, but that reserved right has not yet been exercised is there any effect on the owner's participation quota or not?
It's a really good question.
It is a very good question. And once again, I'm going to give an intuitive answer. And we could flip back to, let me just flip back to the,
I think
here we are.
I think the big screen needs to be shared, Mike. I think we're seeing this.
It is. Okay, I'm being told I'm sharing the wrong one, but either way,
No, we
it's
can
fine.
we can still see, no worries.
Yeah. So, you know, there it talks about, it's almost like the exclusive use areas levy contributions are contributions towards costs. When we spoke about it, we said exactly that the developer is required to contribute towards costs. So we're not talking about the unique situation that I referenced at the body corporate that we have, where it was being manipulated. They went out of their way to delay registration of some of the units that have been completed because they were manipulating the situation. So ordinarily, you know, the developer right to extend relates to something that doesn't physically exist yet. So, you know, the body corporate by its trustees and managing agents need to say, well, listen, there's a portion of land or a rooftop or whatever the case may be that is incurring costs. Let's determine the costs of what that is costing the body corporate to maintain, to insure, to pay rates, taxes, whatever the case may be, and then go to the developer and say, you're required to make a contribution of that. So I think to answer the question is that it's not bearing the participation quota calculation responsibility of the owners of the rest of the body corporate.
Perfect. Thank you. Mike, here's another question on the chat function, and I'll deal with Marian's comments as to the CSOS levy thereafter. I think you've actually dealt with Melinda before in her scheme. I think you might have had a Zoom chat with her. The question is, after the end of the financial year, up to the budget approval at the AGM, may the reserve levy also be increased up to 10% if deemed necessary, or may it be done after the approval of the 10-year maintenance, repair and replacement plan? So that's that interim levy increase at the end of the financial year until budget is approved. Does it apply to the reserve fund as well, or only the administrative fund?
Sorry, I was reading.
How do you do it in practice? I mean, your Pam Golding's offices, when it comes to how often rather do you apply that interim 10% levy increase? I know you guys are very good at ensuring that your schemes do hold the annual general meetings within time. So perhaps it's not necessary to increase during that time.
So we regularly, and I think, you know, of the 150 plus body corporates that we have that are not HOAs, we you know, generally we do impose a levy increase from day one of the new financial year. It's administratively much easier than doing backdated adjustments and special contributions and that type of thing. So we do invoke the trustees' right to increase the levies from day one. It just makes it so much easier with transfers and everything else, that if the intention is to raise it by 6%, 5%, 8%, whatever the case may be, and hopefully if your budget is on track, you don't have a situation where you might have a problem and want to raise about 10%. But in terms of the regulations and statute, you know, you are restricted by that 10%. So you're then just under pressure to deal with the increase. Practically, I quite like the idea of not adjusting the maintenance reserve contribution until you've tabled it at the meeting with the members. Yeah. So I kind of quite like the two-tier approach. You increase your levies because those are your contractual costs, your security, your managing agent, your insurance, all of those administrative costs that you should be able to get pretty accurate because you know what they are and you can negotiate the terms. Municipal costs being the water, electricity, refuse. You know that, you know, your local municipality are going to increase those, and so those are all relatively easy. Your maintenance reserve plan, however, is a document that needs to be compiled, updated annually, and particularly if you've picked up something where you've said, "Oh, we haven't got this quite right," we need to adjust those contributions by more. That is something that, is better dealt with at the annual general meeting.
Fantastic. When you do charge these developer contributions on these areas of common property that are subject to this development reserved rights, how do you name it on the levy statement? Is there like any specific format that you use?
Well, it's not something that we have a lot of, and right now across our entire portfolio, I'm not aware that we are raising those contributions against any of our body corporates. Most of them have been around for a while, and or if they're new, don't have those Section 25 rights. But for me, it's almost using a commercial property management term. I would be terming it operating costs, because that's exactly what it is. It's an operating cost, or just call it what it is. What it is. It's a development contribution, and you could include Section 25 development contribution as the line item on the statement, because that's what it is.
I think it gets a bit interesting when it comes to homeowners associations here, Mike. I think there's a couple of the estates that I was involved in where there was like a set-off agreement. I don't know if you want to comment on levies in homeowners associations specifically, or any unique developer issues that you've experienced over the years.
Well, yes. I think maybe before I get onto that, have we dealt with the rest of the queries and chats?
Pretty much. There was a couple of comments about the CSOS levy, but the questions we have dealt with thus far.
Okay,
you are welcome to post your questions on the chat function. Otherwise, we can also let you unmute yourself and raise your hand, and you can raise some questions as well.
Happy either way. So while we wait for any of those hands to pop up or questions to pop up, yeah, definitely. Homeowners association contributions become hugely challenging, particularly when you've got a diverse nature of the character of the different properties within a single fence line. So we administer a biggish development out Wellington Way, where you've got properties that are 500-600 square meter houses on a 3,000 square meter footprint earth. And in the same fence line, you've got a conglomerate of much smaller units, where they 200 square meter units on kind of, I almost wanted to say 180 square meter footprint, because that's how tight they are. How do you determine those different levy contributions between the different owners? Is it on the footprint of the earth? Is it on the footprint of the actual property that's built on the earth? How do you come up? So those are often, a major fight between the different constituents within a single fence line. I think most HOAs that my colleagues in the room would deal with, they go the fairly simple structure of it's one size fits all. The very HOA that was pictured at the start of the meeting, they've gone that route. So whether you've got a big house, a little house, a big earth, or a little earth, you pay the same contribution. They've got some nuances to that in respect of a body corporate that's built onto the site, where they pay a slightly different structured levy. But in general, HOAs go with the one size fits all. Ruth and one of our other colleagues in office has been dealing with for years a fight that we've got at a much smaller HOA that we look after in Hart Bay, and the developer in their wisdom at the time went with a levy contribution based on the size of the earth, and that has tripped them up big time, 10, 15 years down the line, because there are major discrepancies. The guys with the big urban are fighting it, and the guys with the small urban are equally fighting it, because they're saying, well, they don't want their contributions to go up. So that's I think it's been backwards and forwards to CSOS, I think more than once, trying to find a solution. And I think the only way ultimately is that it's going to have to be referred for adjudication in the High Court, because I don't think even CSOS have the wherewithal to be able to adjudicate on that one to the satisfaction of all owners, because it comes back to what we were saying about notional PQs. The minute you try and change it once you're in flight, it becomes a major problem. The guys who adversely affected, where their levies are going up, are going to fight it, and the guys where the levies are going to go down are going to push for it. So, how do you find a solution?
Not if you're going to have to satisfy everybody, that's for sure. Definitely not going to happen. Ladies and gents, any other questions? Let's open it up to the floor. You're more than welcome to raise your hand or put your camera on. Just remember to unmute yourself. Any questions relating to not only levies, but financial administration and management in community schemes, not necessarily only body corporates. You have the financial genius here today, so please don't feel fearful to ask or embarrassed to ask. When it comes to financial management, Mike knows that I don't know 2 + 2. And we always made that point clear. I always joke that attorneys are not mathematical geniuses, not even close. So we don't even try. Ruth, do you have any interesting comments to share with the attendees today?
No, I think it's covered all bases so far.
Fantastic, fantastic. Marion, I see your hand raised. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi Zelinda. I've been asking questions on the group, but I haven't got all the answers I was looking.
No problem, no problem.
Yeah, admin levies, I understand, get the CSOS levy. Yeah, it's not the maths I'm quite bothered about. It's the what. Reserve levies I thought were not liable for the CSOS levy, but you mentioned that your scheme does do that. But I thought the CSOS directive some time ago said only admin levies. Then we're talking about raising what we're going to call an extraordinary levy for an improvement to common property by special resolution. And that'll be about 2% levies or something like that. Now, do we have to pay the CSOS levy on that?
Mike, do you want to tackle that one?
Well, once again, I think to the extent that they ordinary levies, and maybe we can just put out with the correspondence, we'd rather go and extract the chapter and verse from the statute so that we're not giving bad information in this. But if I come back to the earlier part of this discussion, we said that both the maintenance reserve levy and the admin levy constitute, and I think it was 3(1)(c) constitute ordinary levies. So intuitively, I would think that they do then attract CSOS levies accordingly. I think we are clear, and there's consensus that the special levies do not attract CSOS levies. So I think that's certainly the way I'd approach it. Alex is here. Ruth, you agree? Yep.
Sorry, so the special levy definitely doesn't fall under for CSOS, yeah.
Perfect. Marion, you mentioned an extraordinary, I think extraordinary levy or extraordinary special levy. It's interesting that you noted like that. There were a couple of comments as well about what do we call these levies? Do we call it a painting levy, a security levy, all those fun things? Just a reminder that in terms of the sectional title legislation, you've got those line items in terms of your budget, but the administrative levy is those items. If you're needing to raise anything additional to that, it would simply be a special levy, although you call it something different. So the normal requirements relating to special levy will apply. And in this case, as Ruth confirmed, it will be exempt from the CSOS calculation.
No, it's not a special levy at all, because my understanding is that a special levy is something which is urgent and was not included in the budget. What I'm talking about is not special in either of those categories. We want an improvement to common property. We want to put solar panels on our roof. So we're tabling it at our general meeting for a special resolution in terms of an improvement to common property, which is reasonably necessary. And we don't know if we're going to get that through, of course, but if we do, then we want to raise a levy to pay for it. So it's not urgent, and it was not outside a budget. So it's not a special levy in any sense. We will.
So that is a state levy. It's in the budget.
We'll probably call it a solar levy, yes, because it's now in the budget. But it's not admin levy because it's not operational. It's not reserve levy because it's not repairs and maintenance.
No, so I think you're splitting hairs too far. It's a levy.
Yeah, it's outside both of those.
No, it's a levy. It's in your budget. It's a levy, straight and simple. However you want to split it. It's a levy. You might ring fence it because you're putting it to one side. That's fine. It's a levy, and therefore, it depends how you budget, how you work your budget. So we budget for our contribution to the reserve fund. It's one levy.
Yeah.
you pay your CSOS, and it's minimal. I mean, you get up to $40. So there isn't such a thing as an extraordinary levy. It's a levy. It's budgeted.
Ruth, I agree with that view. And for me, and Marianne, I'll get you comment in a minute. For me, it's an improvement to common property. And the various references in the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act that talks about improvements, and it's dealt with under that component of the Act. The nature of the improvement really doesn't matter. You know, we always used to talk about luxurious improvement, non-luxurious improvement, but you know, it's purely and simply an improvement to the common property, and you need to follow the chapter and verse in the Act around how you deal with improvements to common property and how you raise money to cover that cost. Yes, Mary.
Yeah, but the Act or the regulations very clearly define that an admin levy is used for operational expenses. Administration levy from the administrative fund. It also very clearly defines what the reserve fund may or may not be used for. And neither of those cover the improvements to common property. So we're talking about setting up a third fund, which is not for operational expenses. It is not for repairs and replacement. It is for an improvement to common property. We're going to follow the right process to get approval for that. But assuming we get approval for that, it's a different bank account. It's a different levy. It will be ring-fenced money going in and ring-fenced money going out. So it's not admin levy and it's not reserve levy.
No, I don't agree.
Yeah, I don't respectfully don't agree either, but you know, and it certainly doesn't, you know, so you might choose to put it in a physically separate bank account to give you this comfort, but it definitely doesn't need a separate bank account. You know, it has to fit in one of the two silos. And if it's not being dealt with as a maintenance reserve expense and disbursement, then it's ipso facto becomes an admin fund. You know, admin fund, you know, most of our body corporates have routine day-to-day maintenance and repairs in the admin fund. So it doesn't, you know, every last cent of maintenance expenditure doesn't fall into the reserve plan silo. You've got your day-to-day maintenance that fits into that silo. And I would definitely think you just put your improvement to common property as a line item under your admin fund. That's my personal opinion.
That's the way I would do it, yeah.
So it's definitely an interesting one, Mary, and somebody else has asked, can a special levy be raised for an improvement to common property? And this is exactly what you're talking about. I do agree with my colleagues that if anybody had to challenge that extraordinary levy, you wouldn't have the legal backing to be able to recover it. So it most certainly does either have to be in the administrative fund, alternatively be raised as a special levy. You can't have it as a separate line item called an extraordinary levy. There isn't any legislative justification for it. But Marion, perhaps we could take that offline and you and I can have a chat about that.
Yes.
Perfect. We've got another question. We've got a couple of minutes left, ladies and gents. How does a ring-fenced budget amount get dealt with as part of an AGM budget for an item for which an SGM has not yet been held? Example, water meters. And I think, Ruth, you mentioned the issue of ring fencing. So how do you deal with a ring fenced item in an AGM in a budget? Or is it simply the fact that it is in the budget that it is already ring fenced for a particular item?
Yeah, that's what I mean. So if you put under extraordinary maintenance or whatever you want to call it, and you put in there 300,000 Rand that you're collecting and it's for water meters, that's what you are collecting it for, that's what you're raising the levies for. So if you want to ring fence and put in a separate account or whatever you want to do, that's fine, but it still comes out of the admin. And yes, obviously you can't go ahead until you've done the resolution. That's what I mean. So like the special levy, the special improvements or whatever you want to call it, there's a process to follow to be allowed to spend the money, but you've budgeted for it, therefore it is a levy.
Perfect. I'm glad you speak about the resolution. Mike Power, that's online, Mike and Annette's offices. When I was first doing levy collection back in the day, Mike shared with me a story where a scheme that he took on hadn't raised or rather properly put in place trustee resolutions approving the budget year on year. And the Magistrates Court actually found that for those periods where there were levy increases and there were no trustee resolutions supporting that, those levy increases weren't valid. And only the levy at the last annual general meeting, followed by a trustee resolution, was recoverable by an owner. That has stuck with me throughout the years, and it is really important that after the annual general meeting, you have your paperwork in order. And I know Ruth and Mike, you guys are sticklers for compliance, which is fantastic. So you've always got that in place. Mike, any closing remarks before we say goodbye to our
No, I think just picking up on that last discussion item around the concept of ring fencing, unless the technical clever people in the room correct me and say otherwise, I don't think that there's any reference in the Sectional Title Schemes Management Act to the concept of ring fencing. That's just a practical accounting administrative reassurance that we give our owners to say, guys, you know, we're not going to raise the special levy and dump it in a pot and it's going to get spent elsewhere. We're going to ring fence it. So it's a practical consideration. It has no legal basis in law in the realm of Sectional Title Schemes Management Act. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it from our side. Carol, any further comments, queries, input that you need from us via Zelinda and her team? Carl, I'm not sure whether you managed to get that poll that we wanted to chat about, whether you managed to get that active or working, or whether we're just going to do a quick show of hands and we can do it visually.
We're not allowed to do show of hands in sectional title anymore, Mike.
This is important managing agent business. It's not sectional title.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. We haven't
Carl,
been
did you manage to get it right or not?
Unfortunately not.
We can do a show of hands.
All right. So do you want to talk to it, or do you want me to talk
Please,
to it?
please go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so guys, I'm not sure how many of you in the virtual room were at the NAMA conference, and maybe you all partied out. But we just had an idea, a little bit like the Let's Get Physical that we had a couple of months ago. We had a thought of having a little year-end kind of function, for want of a term, probably at Atlantic Beach again, just because it lends itself to it. But it'll be much less formal and much more about it, just let their hair hang down. We might arrange a little 9-hole golf rounds for those who want to play some golf quickly. We'll have some putting competitions for those who just want to have fun. And just wanted to get a sense of whether there's enthusiasm for something like that, or if you all got your own in-office year-end functions, and this would just be one too many. If you can just kind of, if you're in favor, please give a thumbs up or a hands up, or if you don't like the idea, then I'm only seeing one thumb, so not too many excited. Yeah, I know the KO layers in the room. People would know what a KO layer is from Stellenbosch.
I think a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know how the hand gestures work. Apparently, if you've got an updated Zoom, you simply need to raise your physical hand, and then it automatically comes up. I don't know.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yeah, mine wasn't working now when I wanted it to work. It works when I don't want it to work.
Your camera's not on though.
Mike, I think what we'll do is we'll actually do a social media poll. Carl, can we get onto that, and then we can put it out to the greater audience? Obviously,
we don't want to go to all the effort of arranging something and there isn't appetite or enthusiasm. It's really just a fun thing, low key. As I said already, go and have some pizza and golf, and talk a bit of nonsense with your colleagues in the industry. Recharge the batteries, and look forward for what Zelinda will have exciting installments of her webinars for 2023.
Fantastic. Mike, and to Alex in the background, and to Ruth, thank you so much for the time that you put into preparing today's presentation. It's most certainly a very, very good topic, and a topic that we won't even pretend to know too much about if we're not the financial geniuses and the hardworking portfolio managers and back office support staff. Ladies and gents, thank you so much for attending. If you do have any questions that you'd like to pop to us via email, please feel free to do so. We will also share on our website the recording, the presentation, as well as Mike, Ruth, and Alex's contact details. Mike, I know, is also very happy to have a Zoom chat or a physical chat with anybody in the industry if you'd like to talk about his favorite subject. And of course, we'll see you next month. Thank you so much for your time, and have a lovely day further, everybody. Keep well. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye.